Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey Day 2. We are continuing with our voyage. My name is Rafiga Imanova, and I am Vice President of Marketing of TEDxDrexelU University. Today, we will have two speeches that after each speech, it will be followed up by a Q&A feature that will be brought to you by Eva Kraus. Now, I would like to introduce our first speech of the Day 2. Joel Callahan will be giving you the first speech, and he is the CEO of Curator Corporation. His speech is called The Persona Triangle. Please enjoy the speech.
Hello. How are you feeling today? Were you prepared to start your day today? Or does your day run itself? What I have found in my 30 years of business is not only starting your day with a list, but having visibility of the list of those whom you work with and those for whom you're responsible for each and every day. That visibility provides peace of mind, cohesiveness, and an understanding of focusing on a common goal. My story is about business. It's about 30 years of business, from street business to enterprise business. And I title this story The Persona Triangle. It all started in Philadelphia when I was a young boy, and I was focused on trying to earn money to make a difference in not only my life, but my family's life. One day, I quickly realized that I could buy pretzels for a penny and sell them for a dime. So I would take my bike, I would ride it to the pretzel factory with $1, and I would buy 100 pretzels. I would then work my way up and down the streets selling those pretzels for a dime. And that was my first exposure to what I now term the persona triangle. The persona triangle being the manufacturer of a product or service, the customer for whom you are selling it to, and the base of the triangle is you, either the salesman or the channel. I carried that philosophy with me through my entire high school education and through my higher education, and I applied it in everything I did career-wise. I ultimately was able to secure a position working for an applied equipment sales company as a sales engineer. Now, as an engineer selling applied equipment, I'm at the base of the triangle. I'm the employee of a major manufacturer in a field office where the manufacturing facilities supported our process to sell equipment. So every day I would wake up, figure out a way how to educate the marketplace on why they needed to consider our product in their equation. In this process, I did this day in and day out for almost a decade. And then there was an inflection point. An inflection point, although challenging as it was at the time, it has turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. As we sat in a sales meeting, the manager of the office makes the announcement that he's leaving. He's going to go to another marketplace, and he's going to take back what was an alternative channel and turn it into a factory direct office. The moment he made that announcement, I could see myself being the manager and leading the team in that office. Unfortunately, another was selected. As devastating as that moment was, I then, at that moment in time, made the decision that I was to leave and pursue another career. After many months of negotiations and multiple legal documents, I was then placed in a position to acquire a business that was a competitor of the manufacturer in the same marketplace for which I had been for a decade. The documentation was prepared, everything was executed, and I resigned. True entrepreneurship and true risk, risking every dollar that I have earned, every asset that I had on my personal balance sheet. Now, as an employee of a Fortune 500 manufacturer, I had the security and the blanket of a salary each month. Although I was a hunter, having to go out and kill every day for additional income, I did realize that there were other things inside the enterprise that were required other than hunting. And this is where the triangle becomes the personas triangle. The personas from which I believe are required inside any organization, whether it be a non-for-profit, a family business, or a corporately run enterprise, are the same personas that existed inside our species since we have started to become civilized. Those personas are scouts, keeping an eye out for potential new opportunities or threats. Hunters that will go out and kill and secure business, and new customers. Farmers who will work the existing customer base to increase revenue and drive the performance of the enterprise. Fishermen. Now, unlike traditional fishermen, in this case, I describe the fishermen in a manner where the fish are just jumping in the boat. And as the inbound calls come, as the customer service requests come, they have to be responded to in a timely manner. And then lastly, the surfer. And what are the surfer's roles and responsibilities inside the enterprise? We'll come back to each of those personas with a little more granularity on what the responsibilities are. But first, let's get back to resignation day. So as I resign, sign the papers, and walk in to what is now my new business, I immediately realize that everyone in the room are hunters. There are no scouts, there are no farmers, there's no fishermen, and there by no means is a surfer. So I feather myself into the organization with a philosophy of leadership by example, not by direction, and I commence to hunt alongside of everyone in the company. Not wanting to change anything and wanting to really understand the existing culture before driving change, we do this for a year. Now, I am not only hunting, I'm scouting for others, I'm farming with others, and I'm helping everyone along the way, focusing on a common goal. It was an environment where it was every man for himself. After that year, I took another great risk, a risk of changing the entire compensation plan, which was the structure and foundation of the company, where the hunters would kill, bring back their kill, pay their tax to the king, who was the prior owner of the business, and then repeat the cycle. I changed the compensation plan to a team plan, giving everyone a salary, putting in measurable variables that measured their performance, and paying them a bonus on an ongoing basis. This could have been catastrophic for the business. The hunters could have left. They could have no longer been motivated because of the salary. Looking back at this compensation program change in the business, I'm very proud to say that now, after 25 years, that the team has grown and expanded year over year with compounded growth, with employee retention, and have successfully completed more than $1 billion of business. We have taken the approach of balancing compensation along with the human aspect of being a part of something that is much bigger than yourself, and it has proven to be the best decision that we have ever made. Not only inside the business, but for the employees and their families. Now let's talk about the personas. The Scout. In today's world, the Scout has multiple different positions in the company. They have to understand the marketplace, understand where the opportunities are, quantify them, and they have to communicate a message. And that message is communicated in company newsletters, email campaigns, chatbots, and all of the other digital transformation components for which we see. Hunters, plain and simple, they need the best products and the best services to articulate the value and compete day in and day out, justifying their service or product offering. The farmers have to be able to quantify the existing customers, understand are there more services that each customer can consume that are parallel to the products or services for which they already are. The fishermen, the accounting department, making sure the numbers line up every day, making sure the investment is occurring in the right areas. Customer service, responding when there is a question, responding in a timely manner, positioning surveys for digital feedback as the enterprise scales. Now the surfer, a critical member of the team. The surfer's responsibility is to understand the landscape of the marketplace and time which wave they should catch. Which product should be brought to market at which time. If they're too early, there will not be enough energy or capacity in the marketplace for the product or service to be consumed. If they're too late, their competition will be ahead of them. So timing is so critical, and that is the responsibility of the surfer. The surfer can be one or many individuals leading the enterprise. It's typically the CEO, the visionary, who is positioning himself to take the entity to the next level. So back to the persona triangle and the value. The manufacturer or the product or service on the left, the customer on the right, the base of the triangle corresponds to your opportunity for margin. The wider the base, the greater the margin. The narrower the base, the margin is being restricted. We can see this happening every day right in front of us. Look at Amazon and how they have massively disrupted the retail marketplace. Look at Priceline, how they have changed travel, but travel agencies still exist. They had to modify and iterate their value in the equation. So my question is to you. If you're a CEO of a company, the leader of a non-for-profit, or a recent alumni looking to enter the workforce, what persona are you today? What persona do you desire to be? Understanding the roles and responsibilities that you're going to commit to others is critical for your success. And most importantly, back to the digital transformation, having visibility of your list and the list of the others on your team is the component that will drive your peace of mind, allowing you to control your day and not having your day run itself. I'm Joe Callahan, and that's my story of the persona triangle. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. And now I'd like to invite Joe Callahan to our screens to answer some of your questions. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm quite well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
Our first question for you is, how can roles push changes in a corporation or team?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
How can roles push changes in a corporation or team?
How can roles push the change?
Mhm.
Well, what's essential is that when change is inevitable, all of the roles have to be involved, and they have to contribute to the change in the direction so that there's ownership. And with that integration of all of those roles into what the change will be, there will be buy-in and effective ownership to go through a change and transformation. So the roles, all have to be involved with the change.
Interesting. And so another question someone asked is, how can one person adopt multiple personas in their day-to-day life?
So that's a great question. So personalities, lend themselves to certain personas. People that like to be out in front in public speaking. Some people are very fearful of public speaking, so they're not, looked at as scouts or hunters. Typically, they're normally the personalities that are inside an organization, that are responding or reacting to customer requests or support roles. But we've actually found, in many situations, to push people, to make them do things that make them uncomfortable so that they grow and change, and that clearly anyone could fulfill any persona in the organization, or they should at least try.
And so which role do you think is at the highest risk of being automated or altered by technological development?
Oh, that's a great one. So anywhere where you can put a machine in the middle. So where we look at it is the persona of phishing and responding to inbound customer requests. And we see that area as being one of the greatest opportunities to strengthen and expand an organization. We don't see the scouting and the hunting component. I mean, that's, all business decisions essentially come down to, people dealing with people. So we don't see that being automated quite yet. And then on the farming side, where customers can self-serve themselves with buying additional products and services once they're already a customer. So they would be the two areas that we believe would probably be most likely to be digitally transformed. They are being digitally transformed.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you had to decide between letting go of your job to pursue your entrepreneurial aspirations, what metrics or support structures did you use to make that final call?
So there weren't really any metrics. It was my gut wanting to take that risk. And it was very, at that point in time, married, 2 children, did not have a support network to fall back on financially. And it could have led to, catastrophic situation. And the first 2 years were very hard, very, very hard.
So just believing in yourself, I guess. And so someone asked, I really enjoyed your analogies. Which role do you think is the most important for a business's stability?
For its stability. So for a business's stability, well, whether the business is looking to sustain its position or to grow, right? So if it's looking to sustain its current position, then by all means, farming is the most important, because there's already existing customers and you want to bring business through the existing relationships. But if you want to grow, you have to go out and find new business, and in that case, it's going to have to be, without a doubt, the hunters. And typically what we find is that the hunters make the most money, and they have the most risk and the highest incentive programs, and they work the hardest.
And so now someone else asks, can all companies benefit from equitable compensation versus competitive compensation?
So I think the equitable compensation is really, people need to be respected and valued, and they need to be rewarded for their contribution. And if their contribution directly correlates to profitability of the business, or it can be measured, then, indeed, it's a very difficult area to manage, but it has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed quickly so that everyone understands the rules. So you don't have resentment and animosity between departments when people look at the sales guys and they say, oh, they're just sales guys, making all the money. Well, they're without sales, there is really no business.
And so now someone asks, would you consider it best that those seeking to create something overall should adapt a surfer persona? What kind of persona would an inventor or designer take?
Yeah, so that would definitely be the surfer, right? So if they're an inventor or a designer, that they're going to, solve a problem, they have to understand what's the capacity of the network for the problem that they're solving, and what is the, the financial requirement to solve the problem, and what's going to be the benefit or the cost, for people to consume it. And if that problem being solved is, too early in the market or not a big enough problem, it'll be difficult.
And so what kind of personas mentioned in your video do you think students belong to?
I never thought about that. So students in their relationship to a university, they're the customer, they're the fish jumping in the boat asking the questions, right, to the enterprise. Upon student graduating, from school, by all means, they can fit into the role of any of the personas.
That's a very good point. If anyone has any other questions, they can put them in the Q&A below. We have one more question coming in. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
And it came in, it says, what is your biggest advice to someone that's trying to start and build a business like yours?
Well, the most significant asset is an asset that's not on the company's balance sheet, and it is intangible, but it's the people. So, every person, that is hired, that is brought on board, is critical, because an entity can only perform to the capacity of its weakest link. So you have to focus on A players only, and don't accept the B player on the team. And that's a very difficult thing to manage, and it's very difficult to hire that way, because you sometimes have to interview 100 people to find the one. But my advice would be, don't sell yourself short, and make sure you pick the right teammates.
Yeah. Now someone asks, when you go to start your business, what mindset should we adapt when we face our first hurdle in the early days?
Failure is not an option. All right. Just get up and try again. And don't connect emotionally to or get frustrated, when things aren't going well. Look forward, don't look backwards. Reflect on, the decisions that you've made. What works, do more of. What doesn't work, stop doing.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joe.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Take a short break, and then we'll be back with our Student Org Vice President, Kenji Fong, to introduce our next speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this far in our event. I am Kenji Fong, the Student Organization Vice President of TEDxDrexelU. I will introduce Nick Jushchyshyn, the Program Director of Virtual Reality and Immersive Media. I hope everyone can give him a warm welcome for his upcoming talk, Digital Placemaking in the Age of Virtual Presence. Thank you so much and enjoy.
We are in what we hope is the tail end of an unprecedented experience where our primary means of connecting to one another and sharing ideas has become telepresence. These virtual presence experiences where we set up a camera in our home, maybe find a blank wall or a nice bookcase to put behind us, and then we connect with our friends, our family, our colleagues, students in their homes. While there have been benefits to this, it does feel limiting. But what if it wasn't? What if, instead of being relegated to presenting from my home environment, what if my virtual presence could be from any environment, anywhere, containing anything I imagine? Could I make my virtual presence even more effective and better than an in-person experience? There's no doubt this past year or more has been incredibly tragic and traumatic, with the loss and impact on so many people, from pandemic, injustice, and even for those that managed to navigate and get through those challenges relatively unscathed, we were all removed from our connection to place. Bespoke places, designed and built for specific purposes. Places like gyms, libraries, museums, and of course schools. These are places where when you walk in the door, your mindset changes because of their very design. You're there to exercise, to study, to learn, maybe even be entertained in the case of concert halls and sports stadiums. Instead, we're connecting virtually, where perhaps as a student, you connect to your chemistry class and you see your chemistry teacher in their home. You connect to your engineering class and you see your engineering teacher in their home. You connect to a history teacher, you see your history teacher in their home. Gone is the experience of entering a space designed for the subject at hand. But what if that didn't have to be the case? Because there were advantages to this whole telepresence, virtual presence thing. We didn't have to commute or travel. For myself, I filled up my gas tank in the first week of March of 2020 and didn't need to refill again for another 3 months. That was a huge economic savings for my family. And think of the example of large conferences where tens of thousands of people from perhaps all over the world gather in a single city to exchange ideas. Each one of those thousands of attendees expended resources on flights and hotels. Jet fuel burned in the atmosphere to bring them all together, and then again burned to bring them back home. Those conferences still took place through virtual presence. Connecting from home to home through telepresence, the environmental impact was avoided and the resource expenditures were avoided. So what if we could take those advantages but not be limited by the home environment. I mean, what could that be? I know for myself, instead of being at a desk with some computer monitors, I'd probably get rid of those and add holographic screens. Yeah. Then, when I look over at my screen to see my conference attendees, the attendees can see that I'm looking at them, not simply away from the camera. Or if I wanted to talk about the Apollo missions, instead of having bookcases behind me, I could have a full-scale Apollo lunar lander. If I want to teach engineering, I could bring a full representation, three-dimensional, of an engineering lab setup. Typically in person, only a few students at a time could have access to this. But through virtual presence, any number of students can access this. And I can teach about it virtually via video stream, teleconferencing, or I can share this via a web browser or an application or virtual reality. And I'm not limited to these technological marvels. If I wanted to teach about life sciences or natural history, maybe dinosaurs and fossils, well, why not bring in a T-Rex skull for good measure? Everything here, even this whole stage, is all virtual. The technology is called virtual production. And of course, none of it exists physically, at least not as you're seeing it now. The T-Rex skull, that does exist physically in the Academy of Natural Sciences. Just a few hundred photos were used to create a three-dimensional model. Same for the engineering setup. And the lunar lander, it's a free download from the Smithsonian. For myself, I am, of course, sitting in a home in a small space, maybe 10 foot by 5 foot, with a green sheet behind me. But instead of being limited by that small space, I can present myself instead on a dramatic stage with a variety of interesting subject matters. Now, of course, the first thought that may come to mind is, well, that's just a bunch of Hollywood effects. It requires special hardware and expensive software. And the first part of that thought is true, that in places like Hollywood and other media production hubs, this technology, virtual production, it's used to create movies and episodic shows and even live broadcasts for news and sports. We love this content. But the misconception is that it requires specialized hardware or expensive software. The truth is, everything you're seeing right now, I'm creating on a 6-year-old computer. It has a pretty decent graphics card that would be good for video games. But it is 6 years old. It is not the latest and greatest, and there's nothing particularly special about it. And beyond that, the software itself, well, that's downloadable completely for free. This technology today is so ubiquitous, it's probably already in use in your home today. If you, or perhaps more likely your kids, compete and collaborate with friends on the internet using video games like Fortnite or Rocket League, the tools made to create those collaborative experiences are exactly the tools used to create virtual productions like this. And again, it's downloadable for free. So, instead of being limited to the physical confines of my small 10 foot by 5 foot room, I can present from a stage populated with anything I can imagine. And you can too. What will you create?
Hi, and welcome back. And now I'd like to invite Nick to our screens to answer some more questions. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hey, doing good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So the very first question we have for you is, what advice can you give to someone who is interested in starting to learn about virtual production tools?
do that, get started. So you can look up virtual production through some internet searching. There are a variety of tools that are available for it. I use something called Unreal Engine quite a bit. There's also a tool called Unity. These are downloadable for free, and there is a huge library of learning resources available, both on the home websites of these tools themselves, as well as, of course, places like YouTube. So start small, I would think is the first piece of advice. When you first look into virtual production, you'll probably come across things that are about, making television shows and movies and huge and expensive specialized equipment like LED walls and motion capture systems. And none of that is necessary to get started. You can use a laptop that has a webcam, as long as it has a pretty decent graphics card, something that would be capable of playing a typical video game today is fine in terms of hardware. And so start small. Start with just, can you get the video from that webcam into the virtual space? Can you there are free assets. Both of these solutions have their own kind of libraries of free assets that you can, an asset is any object that you want to put into your virtual scene. So start with all of those things. Don't necessarily start out with the most complicated things like, maybe digital humans or creating your own models and animating and explosions. You can get there, but start small.
And so I guess a follow-up question is, how long did it take you to make the setting that you're sitting in?
I have to confess that it took maybe an hour or so before I recorded the video. As in the lead up to this event, my time was pretty well monopolized by a fellowship project. And so I really had no time to work on this up until yesterday. So I sat down yesterday and assembled a few assets. Now, to be fair, for example, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex skull is something that I had created months ago, visited the Academy of Natural Sciences, took a number of photos, so maybe that took about an hour, and then processed those photos, maybe that took about an hour to create that model. But then I had that model, it's forever available in my library. So to create the actual stage that included that model, maybe an hour, I'll add a lunar lander, that might look cool. So it's largely a drag and drop affair. So if you're accustomed to PowerPoint, where you might have a folder in your computer that has some photos in it and images, and you might want to drag and drop those into PowerPoint, a lot of what's involved in creating a fairly simple space like this, where there's a lunar lander object, there's some text up there in the corner. In my live version, I don't even have the desk. There's no desk in front of me at this moment, but it's pretty quick, and it's pretty easy once you've practiced with it for a while. It may take a week or so of digging around and experimenting before you start to really get comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. We would never know it's that simple unless you explained it. Someone asked, with the return to normalcy, what changes do you think we should expect from our relationship with digital platforms?
I think that they could be leveraged more to our advantage rather than a place to go to as an act of desperation. The onset of all of this transition came rather suddenly, on a societal timescale. And so it wasn't, it's not unusual for us to just immediately grab whatever tools we have. Okay, I've got a web camera, I've got a laptop, I've got an internet connection, and here we go. I can connect to people and we can move forward with that. But as we move back into a world where we can make use of our physical spaces, now we can make more judicious choices about when we might use virtual spaces and virtual connections. I think there is a lot of opportunity in in terms of lowering barriers of entry. Going back to the conference example, if you didn't have the resources to secure flights and the travel documents and hotel and all of that, and you couldn't travel to the conference, you were largely left out of that. Maybe you could read the materials as papers after the fact, but you missed out on that experience of sharing ideas live. And that doesn't have to be the case. So that, that barrier of entry of all those thousands of dollars in resources and ecological impact, they can be avoided, and yet those ideas could still be exchanged live. And the cost of entry can be much, much lower. And even though there are costs involved in facilitating those types of events, decisions could be made to make opportunities available to underserved populations, be that based on geography or economics, so that there's an increased opportunity to share information live and to exchange ideas. So I really hope that we see these technologies leveraged more and more. I think there's another opportunity in that there are a lot of voices to be heard. And a lot of times there are barriers to being able to have your voice heard and to have it maybe taken seriously. And there, with the tools that we have to share information, it becomes more and more valuable to stand out in that crowd. And so again, I think these virtual production tools have an opportunity for people that have a message to share to be able to share that message in a compelling way.
Yeah, that's a great example of kind of what we're not on a great design scale like you are, but like what we're doing today is able to broadcast out to a lot of people who may not be in our immediate vicinity. And so our next question is, what skills are needed to be able to use virtual production, and how do you think they can be gained?
There is a pretty broad scale to that, and it depends, of course, on the degree to which you want to leverage virtual production. So I think that if, for example, you are looking to create a movie, there are a lot of skills involved in creating fully realized sets and props and animations and characters and all of those things. All of that is attainable, right? So we have degree programs. Students come out of high school and study this for years and can come out of that program, capable of working in this space, independently. But again, virtual production isn't just a full-blown television show or movie. Again, a stage like this is actually pretty simple, drag and drop. So the main skill is to download the software, install it, watch a couple tutorials, read some documentation, download a template. The tool that I'm using has a virtual studio template that looks actually far more impressive than this. And so really, one of the key skills is being able to download content from the internet, and then, open those programs and start kind of poking around. So from there, it's, pursue your interests. Everyone has different learning styles. Some people like to read documentation. Some people like to watch video tutorials. Some people like to have a goal, a project in front of them that I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I have no idea how to do X, Y, or Z. But by having that goal out in front, they can start to see, okay, this is where I'm at now, and that's where I want to be. So what's the first step? And then what's the next step? And what's the next step? So, choose that learning style and pursue it.
Yeah. And so our next question was, do you think there are any downsides of having a virtual presence?
There's certainly a lack of, direct personal contact. Even in this setting, I can look here and see that, there are a few dozen attendees. I can't see how they're responding. I don't know to what degree they're genuinely interested in this, to the degree that I'm answering their questions, to their satisfaction, based on the interest that they actually have. So I can't see the faces of the audience. If I was in person, able to look out among a number of attendees, I could see how they're responding. I could see if maybe a joke is more appropriate right now, or if there's a genuine, serious, like, I really want to understand this, and you haven't answered my question yet, and I could start exploring to find out, well, what avenue do I need to take before they, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to hear about. So so that's missing in a setting particularly like this, where I can't necessarily see the audience, and that's just one example.
And the next question someone asks is, what areas of study do you think have not been experienced from the virtual reality and really needs to be?
That is a good one. I don't know the answer to that. Like, what area of study that hasn't been touched by virtual reality? I think that the places where we might call it low-hanging fruit, that are easy wins for this type of technology, is anywhere where particular resources are very limited and or expensive and or dangerous. So virtual production, virtual reality simulations have been around for decades. So I think it's been 50 years at least since the first virtual reality system came online. And naturally, these types of scenarios, and today in movie making, there's LED walls and projection walls used. Those technologies have been used in military training, in aerospace training, in automotive production, first responder training for decades. It's been around. It's not new. The things that are pretty common among these particular industries is that the equipment is very expensive and or very dangerous, and mistakes are very expensive and or very dangerous, if not deadly. So in these earlier days where these technologies were extremely specialized and extremely expensive, those were the industries where it made sense to employ them, because even with the expense of specialized projectors and software and such, the cost of that was far less than the loss of a life or an injury, or damaging a fire engine or a jet aircraft. Today, the costs have come down dramatically. A virtual reality headset is could be had for a couple $100, and this thing that used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, now you can click a button on the internet and it's on your doorstep then a day or two later. And again, the software is downloadable for free. So there are opportunities for it to be used in culinary settings, in customer service settings, in law, in teaching of the sciences, in engineering. And I think that, again, the wonderful thing about these virtual creations is that ultimately they're digital files. And so they're very easy to share and transport. Once you've invested in creating something once, it's immediately distributable at almost no cost. So the ability to share that with others is dramatically less expensive and less daunting than if you were to build a physical thing. And if you were going to make another one of those physical things, you would still have to invest the hours and materials into it. So I don't know yet immediately where this wouldn't potentially be useful. I suppose in terms of caring for your own little plot of garden or something like that. I think you could probably learn just as effectively from a YouTube video as you would from virtual reality. So maybe that's an area that it really hasn't gotten into yet.
And final question for you today, which is, what do you think is the essential step of an individual to have a virtual presence?
Well, I mean, you don't even need all of this technology that I'm showing to have a virtual presence. Having a device with a web camera, whether it's your phone or your iPad or a laptop, Chromebook, I mean, any of these internet-enabled devices with a camera and a microphone immediately give you a virtual presence, because you can now project yourself to anyone who can tune in on the internet. And that alone has already changed the world. Our ability to document what's happening around us and to share what's happening around us instantly and broadly has been transformed by these devices. So those, by their very nature, already are digital presence or virtual presence. You're immediately now present anywhere in the world that camera and microphone can project you. So that's really all you need. If you want to go further, if you want to create a virtual space for that virtual presence, then, again, I'm using a green sheet of fabric, and that very same camera and microphone could be used, and a free software download like Unreal Engine or Unity. And then you can start leveraging that to populate the space around you with virtual environment, virtual objects.
Great. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed your talk.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. And now, as we conclude our event today, I would like to welcome back our curator, Ubaid, to close out our day.
Thank you to Joe Callahan and Nick Jushchyshyn for sharing their amazing ideas with us today. With this, we've approached the end of this event, which has been an odyssey in itself. During day one, we journeyed through the inspirational success and persistence of Professor Yury Gogotsi, the fascinating and powerful framework of speculative design of Professor Nicole Koltick, and the adventure-filled study of ants and the effect of climate change on them by Professor Sean O'Donnell. And today, we learned about Joe Callahan's experience in entrepreneurship and his framework of the persona triangle, which has contributed to his success. And last but not the least, Nick Jushchyshyn's challenge for us to consider how we can double on the virtual and digital environment and increase the scope of what we can accomplish with it. With this, I would like to thank my executive team for making this event possible. We've put in hours and hours to bring these ideas to you. I would especially like to thank Rafiga Imanova, our Vice President of Marketing, Kenji Fong, Vice President of North, Arpit Ahluwalia, Vice President of Design, Eva Kraus, Marketing and Curation Chair, Icolari, Design and Communications Chair, Justin Nguyen, Treasurer, and our newest member, Christina Luderi. I would also like to thank our sponsors, the Good Idea Fund, the Goodwin School of Professional Studies, School of Education, and College of Arts and Sciences. Thank you so much. Please be on the lookout for a feedback survey that will be sent to you after this event. We would really appreciate your input. It has been a pleasure to have you with us today. Wishing you all a good rest of the weekend.